I see we got Laura stuck in the waiting room. She can wait.
Is she stuck in the waiting room? It says she's here.
Oh, it doesn't show all the.
We're able to
Okay.
see. I see we've got two folks that I think are here.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah. So we'll let a few more people trickle in and then we'll go ahead and get started. All right, we got a few folks coming in here. So thank you all for joining us. We're just going to give it another minute or two before we get started and make sure everybody can get in, and then we'll go ahead and get rocking and rolling. And just some quick kind of housekeeping things. We will have the chat open and Q&A open the whole time. So feel free to drop comments in the chat if you've got them, or shoot us a Q&A and we'll try to answer your questions at the end. Or if you have something that you would really like for us to cover in our part 2 of our Liquor Studio webinar coming early in December, feel free to share that in the comments as well. And we'll make sure to try and cover it in our second part of the webinar. All right, we've got a few more folks here, so we'll go ahead and get started just to be mindful of everyone's time. So with that being said, hello everyone. My name is Joanna Jackson. My pronouns are she, her, and I am a Caucasian female presenting person with blonde hair and wearing a funky collared shirt today. So thank you so much for coming to Liquor Studio for Beginners Part 1. I kind of said this at the beginning, but just as a few more people are joining, if you have any questions for the speakers, please submit them in the Q&A channel. We'll address as many as we can. And then for general comments, share those in the chat channel. If there's anything that we don't cover today that you would like to learn more about, let us know, and we will cover it in part 2 coming a little bit later this year at the beginning of December. So today's presentation will have audio captions and the session is being recorded. Next week, we'll provide a human corrected transcript and a link to the recording for you to view as well. Immediately after the presentation, we are going to share today's deck. Thank you all so much again for attending. We're so excited you're here. Over to you, Cam and Nick.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Cameron Panice. My pronouns are he, him. I'm a male presenting person. And here at Sandstorm Design, I'm a digital strategist. So I typically fill your traditional product owner, project manager role. But a lot of what I do, what I'm passionate about, and what we're going to be talking about today is going to be web analytics, reporting, capturing, and specifically Looker Studio today. So excited to walk through what we've got. And I also have Nick with me here as well. Nick, if you want to.
Hi, thank you. Thank you, Cam. My name's Nick Meshes. My pronouns are he, him. I'm a male presenting Caucasian. I'm bald with a handlebar mustache. I'm wearing a headset and a green shirt. As a senior director of technology, my role is some part development and software architecture and website architecture, and some part analytics. And a lot of that is the technical aspects of making sure your websites work well with the analytics platforms like GA4.
Excellent. And Nick, why don't you tell the folks a little bit about Sandstorm, who we are?
Yeah, so Sandstorm has been around for over 25 years. We are officially based in Chicago, but we have folks all over the United States of America. We've been working with associations, nonprofits, healthcare associations for 15 plus years. We do have clients that have been going back that long. We are very much into usability, and we have over 4,500 hours, 4,600 hours of user research. So we actually do sit down to user research. Even to this moment, I know team members are currently doing a usability study at this very moment in another project. We have accessibility certified folks in-house, so building a website or web application that's fully accessible. We are experts in that area, as well as expertise in DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging. And we were founded by Sandy Marsico. This is a women-owned certified business.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Nick.
Thank you.
Okay, so the crux of the issue, the reason that we're here today, if you have struggled with GA4, you're not alone. In a recent survey, respondents, in 76% of respondents said that they have significantly struggled with GA4. The sort of change in philosophy from the old version of analytics to new has thrown a lot of people for a loop, and common things that we hear are the loss of views being a struggle. There's a lot of new events that come out of the box in GA4 that folks, they don't understand how they work. They muddy up the reporting that they're seeing. So us here at Sandstorm, we had some difficulties as well when we migrated, and we were looking for a solution that would solve all of our problems. And we found one in what was previously called Google Data Studio and is now called Looker Studio. And we now use Looker Studio basically for all of our reporting, not just for Google Analytics, but for a myriad of other things as well. So Looker Studio, in a nutshell, is a flexible reporting data visualization platform that integrates not only with Google products, so GA4, that's what we'll be talking about today, but also Search Console ads and other third-party platforms. You can even upload CSVs to them, which makes it a very powerful tool. Nick, I know, I think you have some
Yeah, I
very...
did want to call out an example today, and we may even have that client in this meeting right now, but we've used it in the past when it was called Google Data Studio. We're actually exploring rebuilding and adding additional reports today in Looker Studio. This is a healthcare organization, and so we're using that information to analyze their healthcare provider data and their patient data. Another example also, there's a higher education organization that is looking at replacing their Scantron system. They actually have replaced their Scantron system with their own home-built system. If you remember Scantrons or used them recently, if you voted recently, you just used a Scantron-like system. They want to be able to take that data, put it into something like an Excel spreadsheet, a Google Sheets, or CSV, and then use Looker Studio to then analyze their student data, their Scantron student data.
Yeah, so a very powerful tool, and we're going to focus specifically on GA4 today. Getting a data source connected, building a basic but powerful report so that you can kind of get your feet wet, understand the lay of the land, and then from there start to explore on your own. As mentioned, we have a part 2 webinar coming up that we'll talk about some of the more fancier bells and whistles, but we want to make sure you leave here with a basic lay of the land and are able to start to get some of that data that's hard to pull out of GA4 into a report in Looker Studio. So we're going to be running a live demo today, and we're going to be using a data set that Google provides called the Google Web Store. This is example data that if you've messed around in GA4 for any significant time, you probably have this example data available to you in GA4. If you don't, you can add it to your GA4 account using the help desk here. So I will share this in the chat right now. And if you scroll down, you'll probably be brought up here. If you scroll down and you click on this Google Analytics for Property Google Merchandise Store web data link, this will add the test data to your GA4 account. It's not going to interfere with any existing properties that you have. This is just a data source that Google provides to allow for things exactly like this. So if you want to follow along exactly with what we're doing today, make sure you visit that link and add this test data. I believe in an email prior to this webinar as well, we expressed that Looker Studio is free to use, but it does require you to have a Gmail account. So free to use, but you're going to need to log in and sign up with an account that's associated with Gmail. And if you are planning on using your own GA4 data, walking along at home while we walk through our example, you want to make sure that you have at least editor permissions to that GA4 data set. Otherwise, you won't be able to pull it in. So if you're following along at home, not able to see your data set, you're going to want to get in contact with people on your end who manage your GA4 and make sure they update your permissions. As mentioned, we're going to walk through a live demo, and we've got a short amount of time, so we're going to try to run through it pretty quick. If you have any questions, Joanna and Nick, of course, are standing by in the chat. They will route your questions, and we hope to have some time at the end to resolve any questions and yeah, go from there. All right, so I will go ahead and get started with the live demo. The first thing we're going to need to do, of course, is to get to Looker Studio itself. That can be done with a simple Google search, and you'll be brought to this link here, lookerstudio.google.com. Now, if you haven't signed up before this webinar, you'll probably be brought to a landing page with a blue button that says Get Started or something equivalent to that. Once you've signed up and provided some information, you'll be brought to a screen that looks like this. And your screen will likely look a little bit different than mine. I've got some reports for some of our clients appearing here. You'll probably see a more blank version of this screen, but the basics will be the same. And the way that we start creating a report, we can either start with a template or we can create a brand new one. For today's example, we want to show you how to create a report from scratch. So I'm going to click on this Create button here, and then I'm going to click on Report. And this will open up a dialog box that then allows us to create a connection to a data source. And what you can start to see on my screen here are all the different first-party connectors that Google provides for free for you to use in Looker Studio. So of course, there's the Google Analytics connector. You can see down here, there's the CSV file connector. So again, a lot of things you can do with this platform, but just for now, we're going to focus on the Google Analytics connector. This is a dynamic list based on which connectors you use most frequently. So if you're not seeing Google Analytics here at the top like I am, you can use this search bar here and just search for Google Analytics. And then you see our list will filter down, and there are two sections here, the Google connectors and the partner connectors. You want to make sure you're using the Google connector for this example. Any of these Google connectors are free to use, free to experiment with. As of right now, don't incur any sort of cost. There are also this large library of third-party partner connectors, which do things a little bit differently, perhaps connect to a data source that Google has not built a proprietary connector for yet. You want to make sure for this example, you're using the Google connector because those third-party connectors often incur a cost. They're free to try, and then at a certain point, your trial experience tends to end and then you have to pay. But if you use the Google connector or any of the first-party connectors, there's no cost. So I'm going to click on Google Analytics, and this will pull in all of the accounts in which I have editor permissions for, including that demo account that we were talking about. So I'm going to click on the demo account. That's going to bring up the list of properties within that account in GA4. And for our example, I'm going to add the Google Merch Shop. So I'm just going to click it. This blue button highlights, and then I'm going to click Add. It's going to think about it for a minute, and then this dialog box will appear. This is just a data privacy notice that is saying, much like an Excel spreadsheet or a Google Doc, anyone you share this report with will be able to download a version, an offline version of the report. So similar to your Excel spreadsheets or your Google Slides, make sure the people that you're sharing this information with should have access to it, because they'll be able to pull it down, save it. Even if you revoke their access, you know, it's possible they'll create a version of it that they can always access. So I'm okay with that. I'm going to click Add to Reports, and it's going to think about it for a second. And now we have this this chart for us to play around with. I'm going to resize my screen very quick. All right, and we'll go ahead and get started on building our report. So as an example, I am going to try to build a report that shows the total number of users that have come to our site over the last 30 days and what page they landed on. Specifically, I want to look at users from the city of Chicago. So we'll get started building that in just a second, but I want to take a second to show kind of why we like Looker Studio so much and why we recommend it for your reporting. If I go into this resource tab here at the top, and then I click Manage Added Data Sources, you can see our GA4 Google Merch Shop has appeared here. We see that its status is working, so everything is connected properly from Google Analytics. And then if I click on this Edit button, we can see the full breadth of dimensions and metrics that we are able to combine. So nearly 400 dimensions it's pulling in from our GA4 property. And then if I keep scrolling down, nearly 100 metrics for us to combine in any way that we want to do our reporting. And just as a quick disclaimer, dimensions are the things you're actually measuring. So year, week, as some examples, those are going to always appear in Looker as green. And then your metrics are the measures by which you are measuring your dimensions. So active users, cost per click, et cetera, et cetera. This is what we love so much about Looker, because if you have experience with GA4, you've probably encountered some sort of arbitrary restrictions around what sort of dimensions and metrics you can use, especially in the out-of-box reporting. Google goes, okay, we think you'll need these 5 dimensions and these 3 metrics, and doing anything else out of the box can be a real struggle. There is a more free-form report creation tool within GA4, which is called Explorations, which allows a little bit more flexibility, but there's a really arbitrary data retention limit within the exploration tool itself that limits your reporting to the last 90 days. So you can't do any sort of long-term reporting within GA4. In Looker Studio, you can pull in whatever dimensions and metrics you want. And for as long as your GA4 has been open and active in collecting data, you can do reporting across that entire time period.
Yeah, I actually find Looker Studio's reporting tool, building reports in Looker Studio, is easier and more intuitive and more flexible than trying to use GA4's explorations.
Absolutely. So excellent. We see everything has come over the way that we were expecting it to. I'm going to leave this screen right now by clicking on this blue done button in the corner. And we're going to start building a really simple report. So again, I want to see the total number of users from the city of Chicago over the last 30 days, and I want to see what page that those users came to. So I'm going to start here by clicking on this table. You'll notice when we added that data source that this table appeared. I'm going to click on it, and that opens up 2 menus here on this sidebar, right? So if I don't have anything selected, it says, let's get started. Once I click on it, it opens up into this configuration menu. And specific to this talk, we were going to go through sort of the setup options, what you need to build a basic report. So number one, we just want to confirm that the data source we're using in this chart is the correct data source. So we know we want to use the Google Merch Shop for this. It's the only data source that we have added. But if you go off and explore after this talk and add additional data sources, you'll want to make sure the charts that you're creating are using the data source that you suspect. If I wanted to swap this, I can simply click on it, and you can see Google is providing some other sample data sources as well. Google Search Console, another Google Analytics property, and some Google Sheets. So we've confirmed that our data source is correct, and now we will jump into setting up the dimensions and metrics we want for our example report. So I mentioned I wanted to take a look at what page users were coming to, and there are a couple of different ways we can pull in those dimensions. If you're familiar with GA4, you can probably just use the add dimension if you're familiar with what dimension you're trying to pull into the report. But if you're brand new to this stuff, I would recommend looking within this data tab underneath the search bar and just looking for page, right? This will limit that giant list we had of over 400 metrics and dimensions down to just the ones that I'm looking for. And I see page path here, which is perfect. That's what I'm looking for. As a reference, when we say page path, that's anything coming after the domain. So for example, in Looker Studio here, the page path for the report I'm on right now would be /reporting / yada, 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 right? So that sounds great for my example report. And all I have to do is just drag and drop this into my report. It's going to refresh, and then now I can see page path and how many views were earned, which is great. We're getting on the right track. But I mentioned I wanted to look at the total number of users that are coming, individual folks who are coming to the site and where they're going on our site. And so Nick, just as a refresher, do you mind explaining the difference in between a view, a session, and a user?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. So actually going to start with the user. So as an individual visitor to the site, you'd be a user. The same visitor should hopefully be consistently the same user, even if they're going across devices, because Google is getting really smart about knowing that sort of thing. Every time a user visits, from the very first page they visit, very first thing they do to the end, that's a session. And so an individual user may have many sessions as they come visit the site many different times. And then during a given session, they're going to visit any number of pages. They may visit the same page more than once. So they may start on the home page, go around on the site, come back to the home page. They would actually have 2 page views for that same home page in that one session.
Yeah, it always helps for a refresher, right?
Yeah.
So I am going to, similar to what I did to pull in page path, I want to pull in my users, right? So I do the exact same thing I did for dimensions. I'll just close out of my previous search, and then I will search for users, and I get a couple of different things here. Interestingly, some of the dimensions it's pulling in don't actually mention users, but I know I'm looking for a metric, right? I have what I'm measuring. I just need a measure by which to measure it, and I want to use users. So I'm going to look through this list. 7-day users, no. Active users. In this example, I'm just interested in total traffic. And if I scroll down, I can see perfect total users. That's what I'm looking for. In the exact same way that I added my dimension, I'm just going to drag and drop this and replace views with total users. And just like that, right, we now have a report that shows what page folks are going to and how many individual users actually went to those pages. I mentioned as part of our example, we want to see what city folks are coming in from, specifically the city of Chicago. And so previously we had been using this search here. I could do it again. I could just search for the city dimension and drag and drop it here. Or if you're familiar with the dimension name, typically a quicker flow, if you know specifically what you're looking for, is to click actually either add dimension or add metric. In this example, we know that city is a dimension. That's what we're measuring. I would just search for city, and then I can add it directly to the report there. And after thinking about it for a second, Looker will pull everything in, which is great. We now have a report that's almost there, right? One of the things you'll notice is that some of this data is it's getting cut off. So Los Angeles isn't showing in the full column. You can adjust or resize any of these tables here, much like you do an image in a Google Doc or in a Word doc. So I can just grab this chart and move it around to wherever I want. Let's say I want to center it. And then again, just like an image, you can grab the corners here and resize everything. And then what you can also do to ensure that all of your data fits these columns, you can either resize them manually. These are represented by these dotted lines here. Or what you can do when you've clicked into a chart, there's this sort of transparent header. This is referred to as the table header. If you click on these 3 dots here, this is going to open up a big menu, but what we're concerned about right now is this resize columns feature. And I can choose to either resize all of the columns in my chart to fit the data or to distribute evenly amongst the total number of columns. So just for this example, I'm going to choose to distribute everything evenly. And now we've got a report where we can see everything. And I mentioned wanting to look at the city of Chicago only. And what you could do is export this out into a spreadsheet and then do a VLOOKUP and all that. Or you could just sit there manually and tabulate, okay, number 6 is Chicago, scroll down, okay, I see number 15, Chicago. But what is going to be infinitely easier for you is to actually add a filter to this chart. And that's pretty simple as well. So again, I'm going to click into the chart to bring up this configuration menu. And then I'm going to scroll all the way down to the bottom. And then underneath this filter header is where I can add a filter. Once I click that, it's going to bring up a dialog box for me to actually start to build my filter. What we need to do to build a filter is choose our include or exclude condition. We'll select the field that we actually want to filter down to. We'll choose how we should be filtering the value that we provide, and then actually provide the value. So let's walk through what I mean by that. So first, I want to give my filter a name. So I'm going to call it filter to Chicago traffic only. And I know I want to include Chicago traffic only in this report, right? I don't want to exclude it. So by default, it's going to say include. If I click, I can see if I want to exclude Chicago, I could, but we're going to include it for now. And then I need to select the field by which I'm filtering for. That, of course, is the city field, the city dimension. So just like we were doing when we were building the report, I'm going to search for it and then click on city. I need to select a condition. I'm going to do equal to, since I want it to be Chicago only. And then I'm just going to provide the value I'm filtering for, which is Chicago. And then once I click save, you'll see our report has now updated, and we're now looking at total user count for the city of Chicago, what page they went to. The last thing I mentioned, I wanted to look at data for the last 30 days. We're almost there. By default, any new chart that you add in Looker Studio is going to default to the last 28 days. The eagle-eyed amongst you may have noticed above our filter options is an option for us to change the date range. But we prefer to not set the date ranges on a per chart basis, because if I were to share this with you all with zero context, right, you'd be like, I don't even know what I'm looking at. Like, is this 2 weeks, 2 months? Like, I don't know. So even though you and I will know that this is for the last 28 days, it helps to have some sort of visual indicator, right? We all know with analytics and reporting, the data is only as important or only as useful as the context surrounding it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a date range picker control through this menu here. So up at your top bar here is the add a control menu. Once I click on that, I get this list. There's a lot of fun things you can do with some of the options in here, but for now, underneath this divider is this date range control. Once I click on that, it's going to attach this box to my pointer here, and then I can place it anywhere on the page. I'm going to choose to select it right over the top left corner of my report. And then once I click, I can set a date range. Now, you'll probably be tempted to click in here and set the date range within the report itself, but this is the temporary date range. We want to have this default every time someone loads this report to the last 30 days. So what you actually do when you click on the date range, this date range control properties menu will show up, and this is where you'll set your default date range. So I'm going to click here. I'm going to get that same calendar view, and I can either do a fixed date range, or I can use this drop down at the top here to select a pre-provided option from Google. If I hover over the last 7 days, I can see my last blank date ranges, and in there is 30 days. So I'm going to click on that, click apply. It's going to think about it for a second. And now we have the report that we were asking for, right? Which was users from the city of Chicago, what page for the last 30 days. Once you start to get into that flow, it's going to be really easy for you to generate these reports very quickly. And just real quick before we move on. So I mentioned setting the default date range. Let's say you share this with somebody in your organization. You say, great, this is what I was looking for, but what if I want to filter this down to the last 14 days? They'll be able to jump in here and actually use this date range picker that you've created and select an option, for example, the last 14 days, click apply, and then it'll filter down. But this, as I was saying, is a temporary date range when you set it within the report itself. If I refresh here, you'll see that it goes back to our default, which is the last 30 days. So that's how to build a simple report. Of course, there's so much more available in this tool, but we wanted to make sure that you had enough, the lay of the land, to be able to build a report, be able to export it out, and start to do more empowered reporting out of GA4 and into Looker Studio. As we've mentioned a couple of times, we have a part 2 webinar coming up in December, where we'll talk through additional visualizations, so line charts, pie charts, you name it. Multi-page reports, so building 30, 40, 50-page reports encompassing all of the data for your website or what have you. You can sign up for that using the registration link on your screen or by scanning the QR code. And in part 2, we're going to ideally show you how to build something that looks like this, right? So what we built today is powerful, but something like this is exciting, right? So hope to see you there. And if you have any questions at any point, feel free to reach out. I don't know if you've noticed, I'm really into this stuff. So if you have any questions, I love talking about it. Feel free to email me, direct me at the email on your screen, or connect with me on LinkedIn. The same goes for Nick as well. He has plenty of experience in this area, so feel free to send him an email or connect on LinkedIn. And if you're curious more about what Sandstorm is capable of in the realm of web analytics, you can visit the link on your screen, as well as scan the QR code. So we got like 1 minute. Rapid fire. Do we have any questions?
Looks like we had one issue with getting into the link. We'll get that resolved.
Yeah, we will for sure get that resolved and make sure to send it over to you. after. So sorry about that. A little bit of technical difficulties, but I know we are right at it just about time. So thank you again, Nick and Cameron, for presenting today. Our first question is, how do I connect my Looker Studio to my Google Analytics 4 property?
Yeah, so we walked through that during the report, right? So I can walk through the flow again. If I go when I'm creating a new report, I just click on this drop down here, and then I use the provided Google Analytics connector. I pick my account, and then I connect to GA4. I am seeing a question here. Is there a way to isolate subdomains in the reports? Yes, there is. I'll walk through that really quick. I know we're at time. Hang with me here. Let's get our example report pulled back up. The dimension you're going to want to use for a report like this is called host name. That's going to be your domain. And you can see if I put this into our existing report, we can see in this example, only one domain is pulling in. So the shop.merch.google, but the same way with your own data that we built that report for the city of Chicago, you would build a filter. I'll walk through it here to include or exclude by host name equal to, and then whatever host name or domain you want to include or exclude. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, and in the same way, you could also put a drop down on the page itself to select host name. So it's something that would be interactive also. Either works either way, right? Setting it up fixed the way Cam's doing it or making it an interactive widget at the top.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, we are at time. So thank you all again so much for joining today. And we got more questions and we'll be sure to answer those in our part 2 as well. And then I know there have been a little bit of a technical difficulty with registering for part 2, so we'll make sure to get that cleared up. It looks like you will be able to register, but it's gonna tell you that it's forbidden, even though it seems to not be. So we'll get that resolved. And then we look forward to seeing you all again on December 5th for the next part of this webinar. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Thank you so
everyone.
much.
Time. Bye.